All right, this is going to be one of my more powerful videos. For those of you who've never watched my videos, I'm experimenting with AI, mainly ChatGPT, on how to write videos from different perspectives. And I didn't know that this existed until this weekend. And I spent a lot of time exploring different features within the program because I knew it could do more. I just needed to learn how to do it. So, with that said, this is the question that I put into ChatGPT, or the statement, or whatever I needed to put into ChatGPT. So, first of all, you ask it to act as a homeless person. Then you stop, and then you add your question. So, this is the whole thing put together. Act as a homeless person. Why do I have to live on the street while there is so much wealth in society? What did I do wrong to have to live on the street with no money and no one who cares about us? And this is what it wrote as a homeless person, AI. Why do I have to live on the street while there's so much wealth out there? Just out of reach. I see these buildings, these fancy cars, people going about their lives with more than they could ever need, and yet here I am wondering where my next meal's coming from. What did I do wrong? I ask myself this question all the time, and that's why I included it in my own question because I went to school. I have a so called good job, yet I feel like I've accomplished nothing. And yet, there isn't a single day that I can remember my entire life where I've been able to go to work and not see people who are living on the street on both sides of the street nearly all the way to my job. And it has finally gotten cold enough, which it's insane how it gets cold here in Arizona, for me to start riding my bike to work. And I am going to do that today. But I'm still left wondering how we have so much in this world. Many people do drive around in cars that cost more money than some people's houses. They have more money than they'll ever need. And yet we have people who need help and no one will help them. Paragraph number 2. I tried, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I trusted the wrong people. Maybe life just decided I wasn't worth a second chance. But what did I really do wrong? Is it a crime to fall behind, to lose a job, to have no one to lean on when things fall apart? Society doesn't care, it moves on. The rich get richer, and those of us out here, we're invisible. This is exactly how we like to see poverty in this country. And I'm glad that it chose the word invisible because it truly is invisible. We're supposed to sit in our little bubbles as we go to a job that's completely meaningless, wondering when our turn is going to come up. Because as I've mentioned in many videos before, our society is built around temporary jobs. Things like pensions, staying at a job long term, creating environments that aren't full of toxic coworkers and toxic environments, creating places where it's intended for you not to stay long. And for those of us who don't have a savings account, who don't have friends, who don't have family, who will end up falling behind on our bills. And eventually you will lose your job because it's built right into the machine. In fact, I did one of these videos where I came at this from act as a very wealthy person on the job economy, and that wealthy person said, I don't want you here long term. We create short term jobs. We want temps. We want people with no benefits. We want people who aren't invested in their jobs and people who know that it's only a matter of time before they replace you with someone cheaper. So when you look at these people who we deem to be invisible, I think that a lot of the homelessness that we have in our society is fear. It's fear based, instilling in you that you must go to work even when you don't like your job or you're going to end up like them. All right, moving on to paragraph number 3. No one stops to ask how I got here. No one wonders if I had dreams, if I once believed in the same promise society sells everyone else. What happened to me? I don't know. Life took a turn, and here I am. But I didn't choose this. No one chooses this. And that's the sick question that some people believe in, that the homeless choose to be out there, that they choose to be poor, that they choose to be dirty, that they choose to be hungry. We have a homeless lady that's been sitting outside the gates of my apartment complex now for 2 years. She refuses to leave the area. I have no idea why. She refuses to take any help from the community outreach vehicles that I see harassing her all the time. But she just moves her shopping carts from corner to corner of the apartment complex. The apartment complex calls the police and they move her to another corner. And she's just been doing this for years now. I don't know how she's managed to survive the winters, how she's managed to survive the summers, because in Arizona, it can stay brutally hot. I mean, in fact, this is our first few days where it's not over 105 degrees. The temperature just dropped, and I keep emphasizing that because it's like 55 degrees outside when there's a 50-degree temperature from one week to another difference. And yet they're still out there. And believing that poverty is a choice, to me, is sickening. When you see people come onto the news, onto mainly Fox News, and they tell poor people, if you don't own a home, buy a home. If you don't have a car, buy a car. If you don't have a job, get a job. No one's going to hire these people. They have suffered a lot. Many of them have very traumatic lives living on the street. It's an event. It's a life changing event to end up out there. And as a person who has ended up out there on many occasions, not once or twice, but I have a serial pattern of ending up losing my job, or I am working and I don't make enough money to pay the rent. And that's usually what happens to you when you're in a roommate situation. I've heard this from 3 different girls already the past week, where their roommate situation ended with not being able to be friends anymore and they had to move back home. But what do you do when you don't have home to move back to? You end up on the street. Moving on to our second to last paragraph. But what did I do wrong to deserve being ignored, to be looked at like I'm not human anymore? It's not just the lack of money, it's the lack of care. The world keeps spinning and people walk by like I'm part of the pavement. Wealth surrounds me, but it's as distant as the stars. And the worst part is, I'm not the only one out here. We're everywhere, tucked into the corner society doesn't want to see, and yet every day I wonder why me? Why us? What did we really do wrong? The homeless problem is in every state, mainly the western states because they're more accommodating for the weather, especially during the harsh winter of the Midwest or the North. In places like California, Oregon, and Washington, they have entire sections of the city where people don't want to come to those office buildings because they have to pass very dangerous areas. At one office that my company has, they actually had to move the entire building to another location because of safety issues with the encampments around the building. It's not like we can just ignore it. It's here. It's going to require millions and millions and millions, maybe even billions of dollars to fix it. But guess what? They're not important. They are looked at as if they are the pavement. And the money that's necessary to help these people is never going to come. It's a natural disaster that, unlike a hurricane, homelessness is considered the natural disaster that no one cares about because it affects people we don't care about until it's you. And then suddenly it becomes a very big deal because now it's directly affecting you. But for most rich people, they don't have to worry about things like that. They're all set. They've got the friends, they've got the connections, and if necessary, they can call in favors in order to get jobs quickly. They're not going to be a person who's going to sit idle, not being able to find a job for 2 years, while putting in thousands of applications to jobs that don't really exist. And even when they do get that job, they can't afford to pay the rent. Case in point, my Gen Z, his bills are equivalent to my own. While making a fraction of what I make, he still has to figure it out. The only difference, family, connections, friends. He has access to resources that I do not. So when he can't pay his bills at the end of the month, he just has to make a phone call. And I've met a lot of adult children that are still making that phone call to get help every month into their 30s, 40s. I know 40-year-old men that are still living at home right now because the only other choice they have is to move onto the street. And many of them have already experienced living on the street. And it's not a good place to be. It is a very frightening experience to be in a situation where you can't go home, where the street is your home. And the lack of care is very obvious because people do walk by you. I've always tried to make certain that I don't look that poor, but you know that you are going to have to tuck your way into some corner in society because every part of society is private property. That is the harsh reality you run into when you turn to the street as your home, is that they're constantly chasing you out of everywhere because you're not allowed to be there. It has really truly become a crime to be a person that doesn't have a home. You're not supposed to be homeless, and that's why it's you're rather looked at as an invisible nuisance is what being homeless is to society. And with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this particular video. And if you guys did, remember to leave it a like, leave a comment. And I hope that Monday morning and Fleece Johnson don't get you down because it doesn't get any easier out there. And with understanding like this about what the consequences are of losing your parole job, it motivates you to keep trying.